Chapter 38. I doubt it's working, Syntholo said as they approached the elevator door. Do you have an actual plan to get to the bridge? Of course I did, but it would have destroyed the elevator. I was hoping you may have a better way. That ability you use to get out of your room, tell me how it works. It's not the sort of ability that allows for passengers. I don't just manipulate the shadows, they're part of me. I can feel whatever falls within the darkness and pass between any 2 points where the light is obstructed. I can get myself up there, but you're another matter. So, it's essentially a more advanced form of the Mystrionic's shadow-walking ability? He bobbed his fox-like head and smiled. In a way, although the ability you're talking about is walking between the shadows, not through them. You step into one shadow as you're stepping out of another, Callie said with a shrug. What's the difference? You never technically touched the shadow, Syntholo said. I suppose not, she waxed philosophically, but what if the shadow touched me? Do you even have that ability? Of course, I know how, Callie said with feigned confidence. Knowing how to do something and actually doing it are two different things. Her failed attempt while fighting the changeling, Iron Nightmare, still weighed on her. Let's try it then, Syntholo said. It's my understanding that you need to see the shadow you're attempting to step out of. With any luck, I can simply grab your hand and pull you through. She cursed herself silently. She hadn't stopped to consider that back when she'd fought with the changelings. She'd been focused on the entry point, not the exit. Syntholo seemed to melt into a wall of shadow as the elevator doorway was consumed by an unnatural darkness. Focus on the exit, she reminded herself as she closed her eyes and concentrated on a memory of the elevator doorway on the bridge. Suddenly, he grabbed her arm and flung her forward. Callie stumbled onto the bridge. It actually worked, Syntholo said in surprise as he emerged from the shadows, which seemed to flow into him as he moved forward. I wasn't ready, Callie said with a start. I think that was all you. Tyrell was sitting completely still, looking straight forward, unblinking, with a glassy-eyed stare. That's not a good thing, Syntholo said as he walked up to the main display. He's still breathing, Kayla said as she checked his pulse and then pinched him. You're wasting your time, Syntholo growled softly. He was completely unresponsive. Can you tell what happened, and what's that on the screen? It's a visual representation of the system core, Syntholo explained. I've known my share of cyberpaths and even seen a few duels before. This is bad. So, he lost some kind of duel? This wasn't just a duel, Syntholo whistled softly. It was a death match. Whoever did this wasn't playing. He's been neurohacked. He's been what? It's when a cyberpath hacks through a system so thoroughly that they're able to hack the brain of someone else connected to the network. I didn't know it could really be done. It always seemed like a bedtime story cyberpaths tell their kids to teach them the value of knowing when to give up. Tyrell knows better than to not disconnect when things get this bad. Why did he hold on so long? Maybe he didn't have time, Callie shrugged. Can you tell how long the attack lasted? We're locked out of the systems, so there's no way to find out. What about Tyrell? She asked. How do we fix this? I mean, he's not dead. Syntholo was silent. Well? We don't, he said softly. He's gone. He's been hacked. For him, the journey's over. No, Callie said defiantly, it's not over. There has to be a way. He's still breathing. His heart is beating. I've seen death and this isn't what it looks like. Whoever did this hollowed out his head like a melon. Syntholo said in a distant tone, everything he was is gone. I'm sorry. Can't another cyberpath fix this? What if we find the person that did this and make them undo whatever they did to him? I don't know, he whispered, but I doubt it. What do you mean you don't know? Callie screeched. We're going to get in the new shuttle, hunt down the bastard responsible, and make them give me back my friend. How can you just stand there like this doesn't matter? Tholo turned to face her. The black fur beneath his eyes was soaked from tears. How dare you, he growled menacingly as shadows began to flow from him, and electricity flickered around his body. Do not, for a moment, accuse me of not caring. Callie gasped. Just because you're incapable of accepting what happened here, do not mistake my acceptance of reality for not feeling the pain of losing someone close. A wave of confusion swept over her. She knew he'd spent a fair amount of their journey to Hyrule on the bridge talking with Tyrell, but they're both males. She hadn't considered his feeling for Tyrell could run so deep. It clearly wasn't something with romantic intent, but in his own way, Tholo clearly loved him, perhaps as if they were brothers. She hung her head in shame. Please forgive me, Lady Darkseid, Tholo spoke softly. I lashed out and clearly crossed a line I shouldn't have. I think it needed to be crossed, she grudgingly admitted. Maybe there isn't anything that can be done, but I still want to find the person responsible. If they can undo what they've done, I might let them live. The only thing missing from the schematic on the screen is life support. Tyrell must have found a way to isolate that system from the rest of the ship before they took over. Tholo said. They have control of all the other systems on the ship. What about the new shuttle? We have 2 landers now. One of them is a strike fighter. The problem is that they have control of the docking bay. We'd have to blow the bay door, and even if we did, what's to stop the other cyberpath from taking over control of the lander? At least here we know that life support is stable. Then we sit here and hope someone finds us before we run out of supplies? He said something inaudibly. What? Callie asked. I don't know, Tholo said angrily. Neither do I, she wailed in anguish. I don't want to die like this, starving to death in a crippled ship. You're a telepath, aren't you? Can't you see if there are any ships in the area? Maybe you can find out more about our situation, or call for help. I know telepathy has a limited range, but they must have gone after us for some reason. They're probably pirates, planning on cutting the ship up and selling the parts. You're not helping, Callie scolded. We need to be ready for whatever comes next, he insisted. I'll just reach out and see what I can find, Callie said solemnly. I'll watch over you, and make sure nothing happens while your mind is elsewhere. I appreciate that, Callie said. She walked to the center of the bridge, sat down cross-legged, closed her eyes, started expanding her consciousness, but recoiled immediately. I can't do this, she said in a wild-eyed panic. Why not? Tholo asked. From the moment we entered the slipstream, I felt a mild vibration through the hull. I hadn't given it a second thought, but it's much stronger now. I don't feel anything, Tholo said with a shrug. It's a telepathic wave, Callie said nervously. They're close. Tholo knelt down next to her and ran his hand through her hair with an unexpected tenderness. If you want to help him, Tholo urged, you have to try. She looked over at Tyrell. I'll try. Just promise me. If I start chanting or acting strangely, kill me. Callie said as she held out her dagger, with the handle facing him. You're serious, Tholo said as he stared into her eyes. I will do no such thing. I'm not confident enough that I'd recognize a behavioral shift. I haven't known you that long. It would be better if you put the boy in charge of this task. Callie shook her head slowly without breaking eye contact. He wouldn't be able to do it. I need someone that is more pragmatic and less ruled by emotion. He hesitantly took hold of the dagger. Callie closed her eyes, meditated briefly, and cast her consciousness to the stars. She visualized her telepathic input as a vast, ever-shifting spiderweb reaching into the furthest depths of space. She could see the psionic waves passing through the strands, shifting their positions as the bluish energy flowed outward from an unseen epicenter somewhere beyond her perception. The deeper her concentration became, the more clearly she could feel the rhythm of the energy flowing past her. She knew what was causing the pulses. It was the minds of the vast Cletherian horde, carrying their queen's eternal song into the furthest reaches of space. She fought against the impulse to listen to her song. She knew the prophecy known as riddled infinity was nothing more than an ancient Johnny nursery rhyme, yet the eternal chanting of the Cletherian hive mind had given power to the words, even if the version they were chanting was a corruption of the original. Which verse are they focused on, she wondered. She scolded herself as she watched the energy from her thoughts flowing outward, being drawn toward the center of the web, as if in answer to the queen's choir. All she could hope was that her solitary voice would be overlooked. As Callie's focus wavered, she felt their telepathic voices pass through her. It wasn't the smooth mental emanation she'd known while trapped in stasis for tens of thousands of years. It was disjointed and jarring. The spider weaves forward in time, to preserve this ancient rhyme. Weaving forward each strand cast, linking future to the past. With each thread she does so, the worlds are linked to and fro. Golden child from times long past, carry forth salvation asked. The first 3 lines were out of sequence, but the 4th line was wrong. It wasn't quite new but was a significant rewrite. Granted, it wasn't even close to the last John's original wording, but the supposed prophecy never had been. The next telepathic wave passed through her. As does break what seems real, dark and light seeds have been revealed. Now does break the final seal, hurry now for time is dear, those long burned and turned to ash, rise again their vengeance fast. Golden child from the ancient past, will you accept this sacred task? The rhythm was all wrong. Only the 3rd line was unchanged, and the 4th was a question. She drew her attention toward the ship which her consciousness had left behind. In her visualization, it was just a shadow in the depth of space with faint glowing multicolored lights within the darkness. The lights, save one, emanated a faint pulse of energy as the telepathic waves passed through them. The exception was an orange energy source. She immediately realized the color of the lights were based on the power they each wielded. Sin Tholo was purple, blue for Shinji, green for Ziku, and Yari was red. She could just barely see the faint grayish-white representing Jake and Gauri. The orange had to be Tyrell. He was there but was unaffected by the mental emanations. The other cyberpath should be orange as well, she mused. Her thoughts coursed outward through the vast web. The next signal felt closer, it seemed to come from multiple points of origin. They were trying to find her using triangulation. The strands were slowly shifting toward her. Callie quieted her mind and watched the telepathic waves as they coursed through the vast web. There had to be another orange light in the area, which was unaffected by the Cletherian scans. As the wave passed through the nebula, beyond asteroids, planets, and stars, they came into sight, but just where the wave touched them, with exception of a few distant stars which always shone. She couldn't help but wonder if they were really stars, or could they be people so powerful their signature could always be seen out in the cosmos? Could the Cletherian queen see them too, or was she limited to the strange telepathic radar signals flowing out of the collective consciousness she guided? The closest of the never-changing stars was a brilliant orange in color. She moved her consciousness closer to the light. It did not pulse when the telepathic wave passed through it. Was it another mind or something else? The orange light which had represented Tyrell was so dim in comparison, that it was hard to tell if it was the same sort of power she was perceiving. While it was likely that the Cletherian horde couldn't find a cyberpath, regardless of how powerful they may be, she could get its attention. She just had to send out a strong signal of her own, timed with their rhythm. Just a single line should be enough. She considered for a moment. Would the Cletherians respond differently based upon the verse used? She considered this for a moment and chose a verse which would not only provide them with the cyberpath's location but also send the queen a message. Those upon the battlefield did not know their fates were sealed. There was a brief pause between the verses of the Queen's song. They'd heard her. Callie sat bolt upright and grabbed onto Syntholo. They're coming, get ready. While the cyberpath is distracted, we have to regain control of the ship's systems. I need more information than that, Syntholo snapped. Who's coming? Cletheria, Callie said urgently. I can't face her. Your abilities protect you from telepathy. I need you to retake the ship systems once they arrive. I'll be completely useless once they get here. He nodded slowly. For the first time, she could see terror buried deep within his eyes. It's a little jarring hearing your voice while you're in that form, but I'm grateful you haven't changed back, Callie said in an attempt to change the mood. Why's that? Syntholo asked in confusion. Your pants didn't make it under the door with you, she teased. Yeah, he answered as he shifted uncomfortably. There's nothing I can do about that, other than strategic shadow manipulation, which I can't really do while I'm in Terran form. Why not? My fur creates its own shadows and gives me something to work with, he said with a shrug, or at least that's my best guess. Do you think you can do it? Do what? Regain control of the ship. Syntholo looked up at the main display, over at Tyrell, and then turned his attention back to Callie. I doubt it, he said sadly. We may be able to slip away in one of the shuttles during the distraction, but the main shuttle is unarmed. It would be better if we had 2 pilots so I could take the strike fighter to defend the lander, if necessary. Callie raised an eyebrow. Against potential threats after we escape, Syntholo chuckled. I'm not thinking I would have a chance of defending against Cletheria or any other serious threat. Keep in mind it's a long trip to the Stargate from here. We won't even be able to reach warp speeds, and we'll have to conserve fuel if we hope to make it at all. Callie scowled. We'd have to load up with as many supplies as possible, Syntholo said as he looked at Tyrell sadly, and we have limited space and time. I know, she said with a deep sigh. We'd have to abandon him with the ship. He nodded slowly. No, Callie said forcefully as she stood up. There has to be a better option. She walked over to the elevator and forced the doors open. If you have a better idea, Syntholo sneered, I'd love to hear it. Callie looked down the shaft. The elevator car must have reset to the shuttle bay. That was good news, at least she wouldn't have to damage it. It's a little premature to plan anything. I want you to go explain the situation to Jake. Before we decide on anything, I want him to examine Tyrell. We have no idea what, if anything, is going on inside his head. Understood, Syntholo said with a crooked grin. I'll let him know our commander is prioritizing her peace of mind over preparing for our escape from the oncoming Cletherian horde. Callie smirked. I don't much care for your wording. Don't worry, Lady Darkseid, Syntholo said with a broad toothy grin as he melted into the shadows of the elevator shaft. I'm well versed in diplomacy. I merely wanted to provide you with a little perspective while we're still alone. Wily old fox, she snickered as she watched the shadows flowing away from her. Callie reached out to Shinji with her mind. I need you to open the elevator door, and wait there for Jake and Syntholo. Yes, Lady Darkseid, he thought in response, right away. Callie paused to wonder why he was suddenly being so formal. Now that I know you have 3 aspects, Shinji thought, having correctly interpreted her confusion, I'm starting to be able to tell the difference. Did I get it right? 3? Callie considered, where did you get that from? I only have 2 consciousnesses within me. You feel different when both halves are working together, Shinji thought, I'm counting that separately. The notion seemed ridiculous to her. During her first life, her brother, Eddic, had a similar misconception. He thought the chimera, Veshtaka, was somehow a different person than the 2 sisters who remained after their minds had been separated into 2 bodies through the use of the cloning facility at Farpoint. She paused momentarily to reconsider but shook it off. She simply didn't have time for distractions. She could feel the ever-strengthening waves of psionic energy flowing through the ship. She couldn't tell how long it would take for Cletheria to arrive, but she needed to be ready when they did. If the Queen noticed her, they'd have much bigger problems. Was this the same Queen she'd faced while orbiting the Elderon homeworld? Something felt different this time, although she couldn't fathom what it was. Her tail stirred restlessly as she walked to the center of the bridge with her back to the elevator. She would have fallen to the Queen's power at Elderon if it hadn't been for her tails. That was just a matter of luck and happenstance. She couldn't rely on them to save her this time. The signal was shifting. Had they lost their way, or were they so close that they were just trying to pinpoint the precise origin point of her last message? Sending out her consciousness again felt risky, but what other choice did she have? The choir of voices seemed to grow quieter, yet felt so close she could almost touch each of their minds. What's taking them so long, she wondered. They should be here by now. She'd been thinking of Jake and the others, but her thoughts had been felt elsewhere. We are coming for you, child, the Cletherian Queen's thoughts reverberated through her with such force that it brought her to her knees. She heard footfalls behind her as the others arrived on the bridge. They sounded so far away. She couldn't speak or move. She fell forward, prostrate before the power of the Queen as the chorus of the hive passed through her. Soon will come the day of blight, whither will the tree of life? Overgrown, all left is mired, our only hope a single child. Songs of power carried high, seeking the one whose need is dire. It was as if they were unraveling the verses of riddled infinity and trying to weave them into a new tapestry. This wasn't merely the chaos she had initially thought, but an attempt to force those ancient words to match an unexpected future. This couldn't be the same Queen. This wasn't mere recitation but a deeper understanding of the nature of the ancient rhyme. Callie felt the Queen was attempting to speak to her in a way only another Queen could understand. She could hear a command somewhere behind her, but the sound was too muffled to be understood. She'd heard their song over and over for thousands of years, but it was as if the words had become a maelstrom swirling around her. She couldn't remember the original lines from the ancient past. The future had become uncertain. The prophecy had been broken, waiting for choices which had to be made in the present. She attempted to answer the Queen, but her reply was jumbled and confused. The future's present to the past, with cities burned and kingdoms smashed. Those long buried within the grass, rise again their vengeance fast. Weaving forward each strand cast. Callie paused. She knew the order wasn't correct, yet it had felt right as it had flowed out of her. The Horde completed her verse. Linking future to the past. To preserve this ancient rhyme, a Queen accepts her time to die. Callie shuddered involuntarily. That last line was completely new. She tried to pull her consciousness away from the hive, but she felt like she was trapped at the heart of their telepathic web. The voices of the collective seemed to be flowing into her, though her, reverberating outward into the darkest recesses of space. The ship lurched forward as the main drive engaged. She felt a sharp pain in the back of her neck, then everything went dark.
She sat bolt upright. What happened? Kivaza grumbled. She squinted as she rubbed her neck. The lighting wasn't any brighter than usual, yet it made her eyes burn with pain. We're safe now, Shinji reassured her. Safe, she scoffed. That word breeds complacency. I asked what happened. I need to know our current situation. Shinji grinned. What's going on in that head of yours? I see that beautiful ferocity in your eyes again. I wish I saw it more often. I may love your soft and sensitive side, but there's something about your strength and confidence. He squirmed uncomfortably. What's wrong? Kivaza asked. Are you injured? No, he insisted, but there was pain in his tone. It's just a little discomfort from the surgery. She tilted her head and glanced at him sidelong. So, it's just your self-inflicted wound? I'm glad to hear it's nothing more than that. Now tell me what our current situation is. He watched her intently. She could feel his confusion. What's wrong now? Kivaza, he asked testingly. How do you feel? It struck her as a strange question to ask. You just see, he explained. Are your two halves in conflict again? There's no conflict, Kivaza said with a dismissive shrug. Where's Kayla? He asked nervously. Why are you concerned about her right now? Kivaza demanded. A pang of jealousy flooded through her. That's why, Shinji said with a sly grin. What? Look inside yourself, Shinji urged. Where's Kayla? Kivaza's eyes widened. I pay attention, Shinji said confidently. She's not there, Kivaza said in a wild-eyed frenzy. I need to find her. I left her behind once before I refused to abandon her again. We'll find her, he said firmly. Follow me to the bridge and I'll explain what's happened while you were out. Shinji took her by the hand. Why does my neck hurt? Jake gave you a shot. We couldn't get you to respond, he explained. Syntholo let us know what you'd told him earlier, and Jake decided to give you a shot of the same neural sedative he'd given Tyrell. He led her out of the room as he spoke. Does that mean Tyrell's alive? Kivaza asked while trying to hide her excitement. As near as we can tell, he's fine, but we won't know for sure until we can let him wake up. We all agreed that we can't take a risk until we deal with that cyberpath. We've only regained control of about half of the ship's systems so far. It turns out Jake's pretty good with electronics. What about Gauri? Kivaza asked. Jake did his best, but he ended up having to amputate the remaining portion of her last wing, Shinji said sadly. She's been depressed, but at least she's not in any physical pain. She paused as they turned the corner toward the elevator. Nearly half of the wall panels had been removed, and wires were draped along the floor. The doorway to Thalu's vault was still open. What happened? Kivaza said aghast. Yeah, Shinji said. I said we regained control of about half of the ship's systems, but I didn't say it was easy. We had to cannibalize the new components and about a third of the gadgets in the trophy room to get the ship back under control. I remember the ship accelerating, Kivaza insisted. Was all of this necessary? We started moving, Shinji laughed weakly, but that's it. We didn't have any control of where we were going. You can't travel in a straight line forever. I hope you at least kept destroying the psionic amplifier, Kivaza said sternly. It's fine, Shinji laughed. I hid it in your room just to be sure. She sighed with relief. A panel on one side of the elevator hung open. A string of mismatched wire had been spliced together leading from the panel down to an energy cell. Wait, Shinji said as she reached out to press the call button. What now? Kivaza asked. He knelt down next to the power cell, picked up a small piece of metal with a dial on one side of it and a tangled mass of wires connected to its backside. He slowly turned the dial until the elevator door opened. That's from a laser rifle, isn't it? Kivaza asked. Sure is, Shinji said with a weak smile. One of the fancy ones that lets you change the color frequency. Red sends the elevator to the basement, and violet sends it to the bridge. You just have to keep the door open until you're done setting the new destination. The controller's on. The bridge are the same way. There were only 2 rifles, so if you're in the dock you need to call to have someone send you the elevator. Just don't go down there without one of the communication headsets. Otherwise, it may be a long wait. Which setting is for this floor? Somewhere in the middle, Shinji shrugged. You'll know you've found it when the door opens. They got on the elevator and began their ascent to the bridge. It was much slower than usual. How are the twins dealing with all this? Kivaza asked. Once we got the elevator running, they gathered up a couple crates of food and water and headed down to the dock, Shinji said irritably. They refused to come back upstairs. I'll have to talk to them, Kivaza said with a sigh. The door slid halfway open. The elevator wasn't quite level with the bridge floor. Shinji held his hand to his ear. Jake, the bridge sensors gotten misaligned again. Kivaza climbed up onto the bridge and reached down to help Shinji up. Sintholo was sitting at the helm. He was back in his human form. His hair was disheveled and was in desperate need of a shave. The main display was inactive and severed wires were hanging out of the walls where the consoles had once been. It used to be such a pretty ship, Kivaza said irritably. The elevator door slowly closed. Don't knock it, at least it's operational, Sintholo growled. How long was I out? She asked. No idea, Sintholo said. The ship lighting doesn't dim at night, and we don't have any other way of tracking time right now. Where are we? Limping back to the nebula, Sintholo grumbled. We can't access the jump drive. Well, at least the scanners work, Kivaza said with relief. Not really, Shinji said nervously. Then how do you know where we are? I've been using the stars for most of the navigation, Sintholo said, but I do have to take out a shuttle every few hours to verify our heading. Haven't been very cooperative, but they have enough sense to wait in the personnel lander while I'm out in the strike fighter. I just leave the bay door open until I get back. Luckily, we can still control the doors remotely from the shuttles. Kivaza blinked in disbelief. You seem to have a strange definition of operational. The elevator mostly works. We can steer, accelerate, decelerate, and I, at least, have a basic visual display, Sintholo snarled. In addition to that, we still have life support, and Jake managed to get the medical bay back online. We're lucky to have him on board. Rewiring a ship like this is no easy feat. I for one am grateful. I'm just glad he's not up here to hear all your complaining. Captains tend to have a strange attachment to their ships, Jake said as the door reopened. Jake fiddled with the panel inside the elevator until it rose to its proper height. Jake and Gauri walked onto the bridge. Seeing the avian woman without any remnant of wings was jarring. I do appreciate what you've done here, Kivaza said apologetically. It's just a little much to accept all at once. Don't worry about that right now, Jake insisted. I'm just here to check on my patient. What patient? Kivaza asked. You, Jake said while making that chittering noise again. You're laughing at me, Kivaza accused, aren't you? Would I do that? Jake's voice sounded from his translator. Yes, Sintholo, Gauri, and Shinji all said in unison. Kivaza laughed quietly. Commander, Jake said, please sit down and let me examine you. The title felt strange. Just call me Kivaza, she said without thinking. I mean Lady Darkseid. She looked over at Gauri in confusion. The woman was on her knees with her arms folded in front of her, her beak was nearly touching her chest and her body leaning forward parallel to the ground. Something's wrong with her, Kivaza said urgently. Jake, please, help her. I don't see anything wrong, Sintholo said with a crooked grin. It just looks a little funny without wings. Please excuse my inadequacy, Gauri said tearfully. Kivaza stared at the woman in bewilderment. Please get up, Sintholo said. The avian shook her head vehemently. What's going on? Kivaza asked. She's not moving until you tell her to, Sintholo said with a smirk. Why not? Kivaza asked. You forgot to mention your royalty, Jake snickered. I'm not, Kivaza scoffed. Sure, you are, Shinji teased. You are a Cletharian queen, right? Are his words true? Jake's translator was unable to convey the emotion behind his words. Gaori looked at Shinji with contempt so strong that he began backing away from her. How dare you speak of the lost daughter of Emperor Edekoneg in such a way, Gaori squawked tempestuously. She is Kivaza, the unborn princess. It was under her guidance that the nation of Elderos came to our world. They saved my entire race from genocide at the hands of the Druj. She is more sacred than the golden egg. She is our most holy savior. Wow, that's a bit much, Syntholo muttered. So, the bird believes this child to be the savior of her race, Jake scoffed. The Terran boy calls her a Cletharian queen, and the Lyca claims her name is a legend. He shook his head in a mixture of disgust and disbelief. Lady Darkseed, Kivaza, or whatever you wish to call yourself. I've been honest with you. I think it's time for you to be honest with us. Who are you? I think I need a drink, Kivaza grumbled. If it will loosen your tongue, Jake said, I'll get it for you myself. I object, Syntholo said with a playful grin. A lady must have her secrets. Asking such personal questions seems somehow indecent. It's all right, Kivaza said softly. I'll tell them my story, but not yet. I'm not going to explain it twice, and I really want Tyrell and the twins to be there when I do. Jake didn't seem happy, and Gaori had gone back to staring at the carpet. All I ask is that none of you treat me any differently, Kivaza said, and don't call me by that name. Call me Lady Darkseed or Callie if we're in private, but never call me Kivaza or I will tear any memory of the word out of your skulls. Gaori looked at her with terror and awe. That goes doubly for you, Kivaza scolded. Stand up and insult me or something. I want you to treat me like a person, not some goddess. I think she called you a princess, not a goddess, Syntholo taunted. We'll just leave that title for Kaylani, Kivaza teased. Syntholo blushed brightly. Gaori glared at Kivaza momentarily, then looked away in embarrassment. Well, it's a start, Kivaza said sadly. We're nearing the edge of the nebula, Syntholo said. I've got a visual now. Put it on the main screen, Kivaza said and then scowled. Never mind, they all walked over and crowded around him to get a look at the command console display.